By now, unless you've been stranded on a deserted island, you know the story of the Oceanic Six.
Based on the location of the wreckage, our best estimate of the crash site is here.
How Kate and Aaron Austin, Saeed Jarrah, Sun Quan, Hugo Reyes, and Jack Shepard miraculously survived the crash of Flight 815 off the coast of Bali. How ocean currents carried them to a deserted island called Membata. How they survived for 108 days before they paddled a raft to the island of Sumba, where they were discovered, rescued, and airlifted to Honolulu.
I present to you the survivors of Oceanic 815.
This is their story. A story that has made the Oceanic Six both international celebrities and absurdly wealthy. A story so incredible, so completely improbable, that quite frankly we all assume it has to be true. Or is it? Could this unbelievable story be just that, unbelievable? Could the Oceanic Six be at the center of one of the greatest conspiracies in recent history? And if they are, who or what are they trying to protect? Let's start by looking at their official story. 8 adults survived what was, at best, the attempted emergency landing of a Boeing 777 in open water, a fact most of us take at face value. But in December 2002, Global Economy magazine reported that in the entire history of aviation, the number of wide-bodied jets that have made successful landings on water is 0. Bill Walduck is a professor of safety science at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and the world's leading authority on aircraft crashes.
Typically, if you have a high angle impact, usually from some form of loss of control of the airplane, for whatever reason, the water itself becomes incompressible. It's as solid as concrete if you hit it at the right angle at the right velocities. So what it's going to tend to do is shatter the structure in the airplane. So literally, you may have thousands and millions of pieces.
The only comparable water landing in recent history is that of Valet Air Flight 101, which crashed in the Atlantic while attempting to land at Keflavik International Airport. The force was so great on impact that more than 2 million pieces of debris were salvaged from the wreckage site. All but one of the bodies were so disfigured that they had to be identified through dental records, fingerprints, and DNA.
Airplanes that have wing-mounted engines, like the 767, 777, the engine pods themselves actually hang down below the lower part of the fuselage. As the pods dig in, you pitch into a deep ocean swell, it's going to shatter the fuselage. Now, this is a good example of an airplane that might be traveling 100 to 120 miles an hour, impacting the ground and fragmenting. If you hit the water at a high angle, this would be the sort of effect it should have on the airplane.
Now look at these images, broadcast to the world as the wreckage of Oceanic Flight 815, found at the bottom of the Sunda Trench by the Christiane 1, approximately 2 months after the crash. As reported, the wreckage appears to be nearly intact.
We've got an intact tail. We've got a major fracture just forward of the horizontal stabilizer, yet the rest of the fuselage is laying right in front of the tail. That would be unlikely as well. Won't see too much impact damage at all on the front end.
In addition, the debris in these images looks to have settled in a relatively contained geographic area. In stark contrast, debris and body parts from Flight 101 were collected from an area of well over 60 square miles.
You go through a few miles worth of depth, you should have a scatter pattern that might be 100 miles across. There's no way you'd see the parts of the airplane this close to each other over 4 miles down. If I were to come upon these by myself, it looks like either a junkyard or a stage set.
If what we are looking at is not the wreckage of an airline crash, but instead staged pieces of debris that have been rolled off a ship, whose bodies are those sitting in the seats? The following is an interview with an operator who worked for the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board's Oceanic Hotline. Her voice and likeness have been disguised for her protection.
Well, I took a call from the sky, and he just seemed really agitated. He kept asking to speak to my supervisor, and I wanted to know why. And then he started yelling something about how the footage he was watching on TV, there's no way that the pilot could have been the real pilot from Flight 815. All I know is what he directly said to me, and
The temperature, it's like being in a refrigerator. It's going to tend to slow the decomposition processes way down. But the biggest threat usually in terms of changing the body is the sea life. It's amazing even at those types of depths how much life there is down there. And those are going to be the ones that are going to begin to change the body, typically from feeding behaviors. It doesn't look typical of a body that would have been sitting at that depth for that period of time.
Conveniently, the one piece of debris the Christian 1 was unable to find was the black box, the single piece of evidence that could prove whether or not this is in fact the wreckage of Oceanic Flight 815 is missing.
Normally, in most Boeing airplanes, they're located back in the tail of the airplane, just behind the aft pressure bulkhead. Typically, if we can find the tail of the airplane, then the boxes should be still attached to their mounts. It's a relatively easy process, even with an ROV, to go in and open the hatch, the access hatch, and unmount them and bring them back to the surface.
But let's assume for a moment that these images were not staged, that this is where Flight 815 crashed. The most obvious question then becomes, why was Flight 815 so off course? How did it end up over 1,000 miles in the opposite direction of its route to Los Angeles? The answer may lie at the bottom of the Sunda Trench. With a maximum depth of 4.8 miles, the Sunda Trench is one of the most inaccessible places on Earth. Far beyond the reach of any salvage attempt, Flight 815 could not have crashed in a worse place for investigators, which, not so coincidentally, makes it the perfect place for it to have crashed if your intent was to conceal the truth. A second possible explanation for the inexplicable location of the wreck relates to the geography of the land above the Sunda Trench. According to a 2002 survey by the National Institute of Aeronautics and Space, Indonesia is comprised of 18,306 islands. The Indonesian government estimates that over 6,000 of these islands are uninhabited, undiscovered, and unnamed. If you were going to have 6 survivors disappear for 108 days, what better place on Earth could you find? A place that makes the verification of the Oceanic Six's whereabouts physically impossible. But let's imagine for a moment that Oceanic 815 did crash in the Indian Ocean as reported here. How did the Oceanic 6 end up here, in this area, northeast of the crash site? According to the official story, they were carried by ocean currents.
We have special instruments that are actually current meters, and we also can derive measurements of the surface currents from satellite-based measurements. In that region, I had a set of moorings out in Lombok and Ombai, which are northwest and east of Sumba, and the currents were strongly towards the west during September in 2004. Based on our measurements, it would be impossible to float towards the east during September of 2004.
As to the fate of the other 3 initial survivors of the crash, only the Oceanic 6 know the truth. And they are not talking. No attempt has been made to recover their remains. And when thousands of Charlie Pace's fans asked Oceanic Air to help them locate Membata to build a memorial, they were met with an official runaround. Why? If the 6 are not flat out lying about the identities of the other 3, then they are at least suppressing information about their fate. Information some speculate might relate to how the 6 stayed in such top physical condition on the island. These photos have been printed and broadcast around the world as the very first images of the Oceanic 6 emerging from the sea. But ask yourself, do these people look like they've been stranded on an island for 108 days, living off coconuts and fish?
They would have the fish, which is difficult to catch, and the coconut, which is high in fat. But what they're missing is carbohydrate. And when a person is missing that, they end up burning their own fat stores for energy. And so therefore they lose weight. And once they lose their fat stores and become very lean, then they go into their protein stores, which is their muscle mass, and they begin wasting. And so you would have a great deal of loss. I'd say at least 25% in 3 months' time, which is 108 days or more.
If you compare these images from airport surveillance cameras taken on the day of the crash with these photos taken on the day of the rescue, it appears as if none of them lost significant weight. Which raises the question, did they have another source of food?
There's no way to maintain their body weight with just fish and coconuts. They had to have found some other source of food.
The human body contains approximately 100,000 calories, and though some are convinced this is the central lie the six are covering, that they consumed the remains of the other three survivors, it does not explain the other significant inconsistencies in these photos.
If someone was out on a raft or in open ocean without any shelter, they would be extremely sunburned. The skin blisters first, it turns super red, and as it heals, then it starts to peel and it sheets off. The pictures that I saw of them walking out of the ocean did not show skin damage and the effects of the sun.
Another obvious physical inconsistency is the three men's hair growth.
Now, keep in mind that when someone is starving and they're wasting, hair growth would slow. And they might even suffer hair loss, and maybe have patches of hair missing, but from a beard, that was probably somewhat substantial, big beard. But these guys, they look, like they've had some kind of, ability to shave their skin.
It is also evident that Jack Shepherd's hair was cut during the 3 months in question. When you compare these images taken on the day he boarded the airplane with these on the day he was rescued, the length of his hair appears to be unchanged. The last physical inconsistency in these photos, one that simply has no explanation, is how the Oceanic Six were able to change their clothes. All of which raises the question, where could the Oceanic Six have been for 3.5 months where they could eat a high-caloric diet, stay out of the sun, shave, get their hair cut, and get a new set of clothes? Probably the most glaring point of contention in the official story is the birth of Aaron Austin on the island. Not because Kate Austin could not have given birth on the island, but because she was never pregnant in the first place. According to the official story, Austin had to have been 6 months pregnant at the time of the crash. The following is a radio interview with Security Officer Shiana Mitchell 2 days after the Oceanic Six press conference.
All right, Shiana, you say you met Kate Austin on September 21st, 2004, the night before the crash. Is this correct?
Yeah, that's right. She was in the custody of a U.S. Marshal, and he needed some place to hold her for the night, so we just admitted her to the airport jail.
Uh-huh. Okay, were you in a position to see whether or not she was pregnant?
Well, yeah. I was the one that admitted her, and seeing I was the only female on duty, I gave her the routine exam.
And is there any way, shape, or form, in your honest estimation, that she could have been 6 months pregnant at the time?
Nah, I've got 3 kids myself, and I know what happens to the body, and this bird was not pregnant at all, no.
1 month later, Mitchell released an official statement to the press, mysteriously recanting her story, claiming she is not a qualified medical person and therefore unable to determine whether or not Kate Austin was 6 months pregnant.
A fetus at 6 months is at least a pound and a half, and probably about this large. So a fetus is fully formed at 6 months. It's just waiting to mature for delivery. And a baby this large with the large amount of amniotic fluid is going to enlarge the uterus. So a woman who's 6 months pregnant has a significant enlargement of her abdomen. The only time a woman could be pregnant with a baby this large and not be showing is if she were obese. Kate Austin could have been pregnant, but Kate Austin was not 6 months pregnant. These ladies are 6 months pregnant. Their breasts are enlarged. They're preparing for lactation to feed the baby. The uterus is enlarged, which makes a woman look like she's carrying a honeydew melon. This is what a lady looks like when she's 6 months pregnant.
So if Kate Austin was not pregnant, where did Aaron come from? It's clear he had not yet been born on the day of the crash, and there is no official record of another pregnant woman being on board. Danny Barnes was passing through the Sydney International Airport on September 22, 2004, and met one of the other passengers of Flight 815 in an airport cafe.
I was going into the coffee shop to get tea, actually, to have a cup of tea, and I noticed that there was a girl, pregnant girl, talking to a pilot, and she was pretty pregnant. I was 7 weeks pregnant at the time, and just really felt like, I don't know, I could chat with her and see if she had some good advice. Anyway, so I approached her after the pilot left, and we just chatted about where she was going. You know, I know for a fact it was flight 815. She told me where she was going, to LA. So I just sort of said I'm at the beginning. You know, she gave me all the scoop about, you know, what it's like. And she was a single mum too, and so was I. So we just really, really connected. Her name was Claire. I know for a fact that it was flight 815. She told me that, so.
If Claire is Aaron's mother, it would explain why he appears older than was reported at the Oceanic news conference.
That baby is a lot larger and more developed than a 5-week baby. That baby looks like it's at least 2 months because of the size, the motor development, the alertness. That baby was not a 5-week baby.
But if Claire is actually Aaron's mother, when and where did she give birth to him? And more importantly, where is she now? If Kate Austin is not Aaron's mother, if the Oceanic Six were not stranded on a deserted island for 108 days, if they did not float on ocean currents to an island east of the crash site, if the wreckage on the bottom of the Sunda Trench is not an airline crash, and the bodies are not the crew and passengers of Flight 815, then what happened to Oceanic Airlines Flight 815 and the other passengers and crew? In the days following the news conference, many believed Oceanic Airlines was complicit in the cover-up. The following interview is with a high-ranking employee of Oceanic Airlines who agreed to speak unofficially and only on condition of anonymity.
Well, I would say that that's an absolute joke. I mean, what would we gain from bribing the Oceanic Six? It's all negative publicity. There's no such thing as a good crash in the airline business. And for anybody to suggest that we staged this is out of their mind. They're not in touch with reality. That's not how the business works.
To piece together a clearer picture of who is behind the Oceanic Six's cover-up, we must reconstruct events based on the evidence we now have. Here are the facts. On September 22, 2004, Oceanic Flight 815 left from Sydney, Australia, headed for Los Angeles, California. Approximately 6 hours into the flight, Flight 815 encountered radio problems, and all contact with the plane was lost. At some point during the next few hours, 5 confirmed passengers and possibly a 6th who was pregnant with Aaron Austin got off the plane. Seeing as the plane did not crash into the Indian Ocean as reported, it had to have been diverted to a secret location where it landed and the passengers were removed. The fate of the aircraft and the remaining passengers is still unknown. For 108 days, the Oceanic Six had access to shelter, unlimited food, personal grooming supplies, and a change of clothes. Aaron Austin was born during this time. Over 2 months after the crash, the staged wreckage of Flight 815 was discovered by the Christian 1. In January 2005, the Oceanic Six paddled ashore on Sumba Island, where they were rescued. Whoever is behind this colossal hoax had to have had unimaginable financial backing and the cooperation of the highest levels of power. A level of power that could only point to the United States federal government, the United Nations, or an unknown organization with unparalleled international reach. The connection between the Oceanic Six and whoever is behind the lie remains unclear. Why was the existence of survivors added to the fabricated story in the first place? Why were these 6 chosen? Is one or all of them linked to whoever is behind the hoax? Initially, it seemed their participation in the cover-up was being paid for by enormous undisclosed settlements. Kate Austin also received a notoriously light sentence for murder and armed robbery. Sun Quan became a controlling partner in her father's company, Pac Heavy Industries, which has been linked to organized crime for years. But in the years since the press conference, the Oceanic Six have been surrounded by nothing but tragedy and erratic behavior. Saeed Jarrah's wife, Nadia, was killed in October of 2005. Hugo Reyes was readmitted to the Santa Rosa Mental Health Institute after a high-speed chase with the LAPD. and Jack Shepard's life has been plagued by drug and alcohol abuse and increasing isolation, threatening to end his career as a renowned spinal surgeon. What used to seem apparent, that money and privilege were buying their silence, now seems like something much different. The Oceanic Six now seem to be motivated by something much deeper: fear. But fear of what? Or whom?